Fantastic. Good morning and welcome to Norcal APEX Accelerator's webinar, How to Stand Out, a certification overview. My name is Amanda Anderson. I'm the program coordinator for Norcal APEX Accelerator. And today I'm joined by Paul Tavernia, one of our fantastic procurement specialists, as well as a very special guest. We have Darlene Neal with us today, and she operates the Women's Business Centers in Oakland and assists with the Women's Business Center in San Jose. But I'll go ahead and let her tell you a little bit about how those women's business centers can help you.
Great, thank you, and good morning to everyone out there. We appreciate you joining us today for such some valuable information. So as Amanda said, I am Darlene Neal, Director of the Women's Business Center here in Oakland. We have this business to help everyone in the community. And so A New America Corporation is proud to host 4 of the Women's Business Center and the U.S. Small Business Administration, San Francisco District that covers Northern California. The Women's Business Center is funded in part by the U.S. Small Business Administration as a resource partner. A New America's Women's Business Center also provides training, counseling, and other support services to help women entrepreneurs start and successfully grow their businesses. We are here to support you. The Women's Business Center represents a national network of over 100 educational centers throughout the United States and its territories, and is designed to assist women in starting and growing small businesses. WBC seek to help level the playing field for women entrepreneurs who are still facing, in this time, unique obstacles in the business world. So our goal is to really be there to meet you where you're at. Our services are provided at no cost. And again, our business hours are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we are here to assist you whatever your needs may be. We do a lot of great work with helping anyone prepare for certifications. So again, we are a resource partner to the SBA and allow us to, however, make services available for you. So again, we are here to help you. My information is here. You can go on to www.anewamerica and find out again the different services and products that we offer, as well as webinars that we put on for our calendar. So again, look forward to this webinar being such an educational piece for everyone. And I'll turn it back over to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Darlene. And the Women's Business Center is absolutely a resource you should connect with. And another resource, one very close to my heart, is Apex Accelerators. So before we get into the main presentation, I want to let you know a little bit about Apex Accelerators and how we can help you with government contracting. So we are a nationwide network of, I believe we just opened a new one, so 97 centers that are all funded through grants from the federal and state governments to help you with government contracting. And because of our funding, we are at absolutely no cost to you. We will never ask you to pay for any of our services, but we will always be here for you if you have a procurement issue. And so we provide education and training and counseling. And how do we do that? As Norcal APEX Accelerator, we offer our assistance through 3 main pillars. First, our one-on-one counseling, where you can meet with a procurement specialist, like our fantastic presenter today, or one of the other fantastic procurement specialists we have on our staff. And you meet with them one-on-one over Zoom, or if you are in a location where we have and can meet in a physical office, that is also an option. And what this is this counselor becomes a coach in your corner, essentially. They will be there for you through every hiccup and hurdle you experience in government contracting, from maybe a tricky first registration in Cal eProcure or SAM, or maybe helping you get one of the many certifications we'll be talking about today. And our counselors can even help you after you win your first contract with the paperwork and compliance and the reporting. They can help demystify a lot of the jargon in the procurement world. And they're here for you, whether you want to meet with them once a week, once a month, or once a year. And another fantastic service that we offer alongside our one-on-one counseling is our custom bid matching service. Now, this is a software that our program pays for and is able to offer to our clients at absolutely no cost. And this software, based on criteria that you fine tune and define with your procurement specialist, this software is able to scrape and search local, state, and federal procurement sites for opportunities, relevant solicitations to your business based on that criteria. So, say you can only perform a service in a certain geographical location, or maybe your product is innovative and new, and the product itself is a key term in the solicitations you're looking to bid on. This software sends you relevant solicitations directly to your inbox, taking a lot of the time and tediousness out of finding the solicitations. And finally, our third pillar of resource is one you're taking advantage of right now. It's our webinars and resources and trainings. Alongside the many webinars and in-person events we do throughout the year, we maintain a really robust website with links and resources and explanations, as well as past webinar recordings that you can access from anywhere, whether you're within our service area or not, as opposed to the counseling and custom bid matching, which we can only offer to clients within our service area. And that's why the resources and training have a really special place in my heart, because they're here for everybody and anybody who's looking for that kind of assistance. So if you are looking for government contracting assistance and are within our service area, please feel free to visit our website and apply for services. It's a really brief application, and once you do and you are accepted, you'll be paired with a procurement specialist who can be your coach in the corner, kind of guiding you on and cheering you on through your procurement journey. But again, if you're not within our Northern California service area, do not fret. Remember, there are 97 centers across the US that are here to help you. And you can use that link in the slideshow once you get it to find your center. And before we get in, I do want to mention a bit of a training disclosure, because certifications often change and the regulations around them often do. The information provided herein is accurate to the best of the presenter's ability at the time of this presentation on August 22nd of 2024. Some or all of the provisions mentioned herein could or may be changed by the current administration, with or without prior notice. So with that little disclaimer out of the way, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Paul for our main presentation.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. As Amanda mentioned, my name is Paul Tavernia. I am one of the procurement specialists, counselors, consultants here at the Norcal APEX Accelerator. And I like to say the reason we're able to offer our services at no cost is because it's your tax dollars at work. So essentially, we work for you. Take advantage of any and all the resources, the resource partners, whether through with the SBA, as was mentioned earlier, or through us, that are available to you. And you don't have to pay anybody to go through and get the certifications that we're going to talk about today. There will be lots of sharks swimming around wanting to separate you from your money to help with these certifications. But the net of it is, that's why we're here. As Amanda mentioned, we help demystify the whole government contracting arena, and so that you understand it a lot better as well. So with that being said, today we're going to talk about certifications, and we're just basically going to go through the entire food chain. We'll talk at a federal level, the state level, city and county, and more localized level. We'll talk about formal certifications and how to go about pursuing those. And then we will have a couple of stoppages where we can answer some questions. So when we get to that, if you have a question, go ahead and, as Amanda mentioned, put it in the Q&A session, and then we will tackle those when we come to those breakpoints. All right. So with that, let's continue. I'm trying to get all my controls here. There we go. So we're going to start with the federal government. And so you think, well, why would I want to do business with the feds? Well, in any given year, the federal government, and probably this slide probably needs to be updated because it's probably upwards of about $700 billion worth of discretionary spending now that's available by the US government. They are the largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And what that does is that presents a tremendous opportunity for businesses of all sizes. And, by statute, 23% of the prime contracts that the federal government awards are supposed to go to small businesses. So what that means is that in any given year, that's probably $125 to $140 billion opportunity for small businesses to contract with the federal government. Okay. And additionally, just to kind of assist those maybe business types that, and this is what we're really going to talk about today, that maybe aren't quite as as equal a footing to compete. There are designated thresholds for small business participation by certain socioeconomic groups, and you can see them listed there, and they're associated contracting thresholds. Okay, and those are the federal government certifications that we're going to talk in specific detail about today. But so if your product or service lends itself towards the federal government, there's a lot of opportunities there. I will tell you, it takes a lot of tenacity. It is not for the faint of heart. It requires a lot of laser focus, but if you are in a position where you can target your agencies and really fine-tune your value proposition and the differentiator that your business provides vis-a-vis your competition, it can be very lucrative. Okay. So how to get started in the process. Amanda mentioned SAM, System for Award Management. That is the portal that any business, small, medium, or large, that wants to do business with the federal government has to register. Been in place for a number of years. The application was developed and managed by the General Services Administration. But this is the first step before you do anything else. And that's, what a lot of, not only myself, but my other counselors do on a day-to-day basis is help businesses that are looking to get into the federal arena start off through their sam.gov registration. Okay. And I'm going to stop my video and save some bandwidth here. There we go. So registering in sam.gov, pretty straightforward. You want to make sure that you have all of your company information at the ready when you sit down, because they're going to ask you for not only your contact information and your address, but they're going to ask you for your bank accounts and your bank routing number and bank account numbers and those kind of things, because the federal government pays electronically. Okay. So you'll want to have all that documentation with you at your ready. Now, while we're on the subject, though, I want to bring up something that happens, I won't say often, but more than I'd like. When you start the registration process in sam.gov, one of the first things it does after you hit submit is it goes back and it looks at IRS information from your tax returns. And what it compares is your name and your business name to your tax returns. And I will tell you that they have to match exactly. And so I'm working with one of my clients now. When they develop and they put in their business, it's a sole proprietorship, they put in their name as the business owner, but they forgot their middle initial. Well, on their tax returns that were filed in previous years, it had their middle initial. So when sam.gov goes back and looks at the IRS information, it doesn't match up. The system hiccups and sends you an error message, and then you got to go through all the machinations of trying to get that fixed. So just one thing to keep in mind on the front end, whether you're a sole proprietorship or an LLC or S Corp or C Corp, whatever it is, that when you enter the information as you start your sam.gov registration, that it matches the IRS information exactly. Okay, just a little heads up for you to hopefully prevent maybe some unforeseen glitches as you start that process. Okay, so once you've got into sam.gov, you've received your CAGE code, CAGE code from the Defense Logistics Agency, then you're good to go. Then you're ready to hunt for opportunities with the federal government. Okay. So federal certifications. They've all, well, most of them have been formalized to the point where it requires SBA review and approval. Okay. Now, in the past, for the 4 different certifications that we highlighted earlier, if you want, let's say you were eligible for all 4 of them, you would have had to go into 4 different systems, enter your information 4 different times, and be reviewed by 4 different teams to get 4 different certifications. What the SBA is in the process of doing is trying to create a single portal so that if you're a small business, you go into the SBA portal, you tell them who you are and what you do and about that, and answer the questions. It will tell you, supposedly, which certifications you're eligible for, and then it'll become a single portal for you to enter your information, so that you don't have to, like I said, enter it multiple times, and it's there, and it's applicable to any in the all certifications that you're eligible for. Okay, so right now there's a moratorium on new applications. The word on the street is that this new portal will be opened up sometime in September, so stay tuned. I'm hoping that it happens, because when I was at the SBA, and I was there for 17 years, helping folks in government contracting, it was quite frustrating for them to have to go through multiple systems with multiple interfaces to apply for multiple certifications. So hopefully we're going to get to the point where it's one-stop shopping, and hopefully it'll happen in the near future. Okay, so that's, normally when I would do these seminars and webinars, I would talk about, the application process for each one of those certifications. Well, since there's a moratorium and they're going to the single system, we don't have to go through all those nitty-gritty details today. Okay. So, as I mentioned, the federal certifications are formal. They require review and approval from the SBA. There is some eligibility for sole source contracts. However, I don't like to play that up too much, in that, well, let's just talk about it while we just broach the subject. The federal regulations indicate that for all of the socioeconomic subset groups that are formally certified, there are provisions for sole source contracts. However, with the exception of 8A and to a certain extent the service disabled veteran-owned small business, the sole source opportunity really isn't there for like HubZone and women-owned, because in order for a HubZone firm, for example, to receive a sole source contract, they have to be the only HubZone firm in the country that provides that product or service. So as you can imagine, the odds of that are pretty long. And in all my time at the SBA, I never saw a sole source hub zone nor women-owned small business contract. So I don't want to overplay that too much. It's there in the regulations, but it really only applies more to the 8A and to a certain extent the service disabled veteran-owned program, and we'll talk about that. But however, for hub zones, there is something unique in that if a hub zone firm, an eligible certified hub zone firm, is competing in a full and open solicitation, then their proposal is awarded a 10% price preference. So if they, let's say they're bidding against large firms, and let's say it's a $1 million, a large firm bids $1 million, and it would be the lowest price. Well, and a hub zone firm comes in at $1.05 million, all right, maybe $50,000 above or $70,000 above, because they're within that 10% threshold. They actually, when you apply the preference, their price would be below the $1 million price that the large business offered, and they would be awarded the contract at their bid price, not at the evaluation price. So that's something that's unique to the hub zone certification. Don't see it very often, but you never know. It's good that it's out there. Okay. So we'll kick it off with the veteran-owned small business certifications, and there are two of them. There is the service disabled veteran-owned small business certification and the veteran-owned small business certification. Okay. And they will both, you apply through the same, you'll apply through the same portal, and depending upon your circumstances, apply for certainly the veteran-owned small business, but potentially also the service-related disability veteran-owned. So VOSB, veteran-owned, they, as of January 23rd of 23 rather, the SBA took over the certification function. It had been executed by the VA in the past, but Congress said, we want to get it all under one roof. So SBA, you take over the veteran-owned certifications and that process, which they did. So as I mentioned, there are two certifications, VOSB and SDVOSB, and we'll talk about them. Okay. So we'll take the first one, the service disabled veteran-owned small business, SDVOSB. Okay, here's the eligibility requirements or the eligibility criteria. So the individual or individuals, if there's more than one, have to have a service-connected disability. And that would show up on the discharge papers, whether it's a DD-214 or a letter from the VA that states that the individual has a service-connected disability. Now, with the federal system, there is no minimum percentage threshold of disability that has to be stated. So even if your discharge papers indicate a 0% disability, but it does indicate a disability, then you would be eligible to apply for this certification. Some of the other eligibility criteria that are kind of applicable across the board is the firm has to be small based upon the size standards that are kept by the SBA. And depending upon the type of business, that will either be a revenue size standard where it's gross revenues averaged on an annual basis over a 5-year period of time, or potentially an employee-based standard. So it's the number of employees of the company, again, averaged over 5 years on an annual basis. The firm has to be 51 unconditionally owned and controlled by a service disabled veteran or veterans. So if there's multiple veterans, they each have to be have a service-connected disability. They have to control the day-to-day operations and management decisions of the business, and the SBA will look to make sure that the disabled veteran upon whom eligibility is based holds the highest officer position in the business. Okay. Now you can see with the asterisk, there are special circumstances where a spouse or permanent caregiver can run the day-to-day operations, but don't see that very often. Okay. So those are the main eligibility criteria for the SDVOSB certification. And with the veteran-owned small business concern, then it's the same criteria, other than so the business has to be owned majority by veterans, either one or more, but they don't have to have the service disabled disability. And then, but the other things apply: ownership, control. The business has to be small, those kind of things. Okay. But, and here's where I was talking about the sole source aspects. With the service related or service disabled veteran owned small business, the VA, and only the VA right now, is able to award on a sole source basis a contract to an SDVOSB. And by sole source, we mean that they contract directly with that firm. It is not competed. Typically, it's not advertised. Okay, but they can offer it to a service disabled veteran on a sole source basis. Okay, and the hierarchy within the VA is SDVOSBs are first, followed by veteran-owned small businesses, followed by the other socioeconomic groups that we're going to talk about, and then followed by small businesses. Okay, so if you are a veteran or a veteran with a service-connected disability and you are looking to do business with the federal government, certainly pursue this certification. And the VA ought to be probably at the top of your targeted customer market list, right? Because of this Veterans First contracting program that's unique to the VA, okay? And certifications have to be reviewed and approved. If it's like the others, it's like every 3 years, you may end up having to go through a formal certification, but on an annual basis, they will ask you to recertify that everything is still true and accurate as it was before. Okay, so that's the Veterans Program in a nutshell. So the next certification we're going to talk about is the 8A Business Development Program. And it's, as its name applies, it's much more than just a certification. It's a 9-year program that targets socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and we'll talk about that. And there are some unique things about the program that really kind of help these types of businesses as they look to get involved in federal government contracting. So, as I mentioned, the 8A program, it is a 9-year program. It has a finite start and end date. Socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. And the key thing here is it's a once in the lifetime opportunity. So the person or persons upon whom eligibility is based can apply for the certification once. And then at the end of 9 years, they're done. They can't apply again. Whereas with HUBZone or SDVOSB or women-owned, those certifications you can maintain for a long period of time as long as you meet the eligibility criteria. Okay, so 8A eligibility criteria, again, the business has to be small per the size standards. Ownership and control, socially and economically disadvantaged. One of the things that's unique to the 8A program is that there is a 2-year in business rule for the 8A program, which is not a requirement for the other certifications. And the rationale behind that is, and it relates back to sole source contracts, is that if the federal government is going to potentially award a sole source contract to an 8A firm, well, there's tax dollars at work, right? And so you want to make sure that the contractor is going to be able to successfully execute on that contract, right? And and you know, the way that that's determined is when the SBA reviews the application, they look at the last 2 years of tax returns and financial statements because they want to make sure that the firm has the capacity and self-performance capabilities to execute successfully. And they've got the necessary financial wherewithal, whether it be access to working capital, that sort of thing, so that they've got I'll say, a better than average chance of success. Because one of the things to keep in mind in the federal arena is you do not want to fail. You do not want to receive a termination for default, because if you do, they're not going to invite you back to the dance. And that's whether that's 8A, Hub Zone, Women Owned, Service Disabled, doesn't matter. You don't want to fail. So again, it comes back to, if you're assessing the federal government as a potential customer space, go into it with your eyes open, but certainly keep that in mind, that you do not want to fail under any circumstances, because it's problematic. Okay, so 2-year in business rule. However, there is the opportunity for a waiver to the 2-year rule, but you have to demonstrate, the persons upon whom eligibility is based have to demonstrate pretty significant industry experience, and you've got to have at least 1 year's worth of a track record of financial performance, successful contract execution, that sort of thing. So minimum of at least 12 months, because the SBA is going to be looking for financial information in order to determine whether or not you're small, and determine whether or not you've got the financial wherewithal to compete in the federal arena, right? And so we're going to need, or they, used to be me, but they are going to need at least a full year of financial statements, your profit and loss, as well as your balance sheet, as well as at least one full year tax return for that business. Okay. So social disadvantaged. In the past, or it still is, social disadvantage was based primarily upon ethnicity. Okay. And there you can see the 5 member groups, if you will, minority groups that are eligible, right? It used to be, up until June, July of 2023, that if you were applying for the 8A program, you were presumed to be socially disadvantaged by default if you were a member of one of these minority groups. However, based upon a federal judge ruling, that presumption is no longer de facto, if you will. So as you apply, you will be required to submit a statement verifying your social disadvantage. And what the SBA is going to look for is 2 instances where I'll say, been subjected to bias, prejudice, or discrimination because of your ethnicity. And it could be personal, it could be work related, it could be even your economic circumstances when you were growing up, right? So again, they're going to ask for you to give them 2 examples of that: education, work, whatever the case may be. Okay, so that's the change that took place about a year or so ago. Okay, now, for if you happen to be not a member of one of the recognized groups, there is a provision to justify or prove social disadvantage based upon other factors. Okay. And the example I use here is a Caucasian female, right? Not part of the recognized minority groups, but um, if, let's say, the woman has evidence and where she has been subjected to, as I say, bias, prejudice, discrimination because of her gender, then she can put together a case. I will tell you, it's a steep hill to climb, but it's not impossible. Okay, and there you can see some of the who, what, why, when, and how information that the SBA is going to ask for to provide evidence of social disadvantage based upon something other than ethnicity. Okay, and it can be done. I will tell you that when I was at the SBA here in the Sacramento district office, as I was managing the 8A portfolio for the district, there were a number of firms, two or three firms that were owned by Caucasian females that had put together a case and proven their case of social disadvantage based upon their gender. Okay, so it can be done. All right, so just something to keep in mind. Okay, from a social disadvantage standpoint. I keep jumping ahead at 2 slides at a time. Anyway, so the other part of the 8A eligibility criteria is economic disadvantage. Okay, and this is more of an empirical type of calculation. Certainly, it's for the rationale behind it is for individuals that may have had issues or challenges, access to capital or credit in the past. Okay, due to whatever circumstances, being denied for credit cards or letters of credit or whatever the case may be, right? So that's kind of the basis for economic disadvantage, but then there are the empirical calculations as well. So the individual cannot have total assets, which includes business assets, in excess of $4 million. Okay. The personal income averaged on an annual basis over 3 years cannot exceed $350,000. So that's a pretty big number. And then the person's adjusted net worth has to be less than $750,000. And the way they calculate the adjusted net worth is you take your normal net worth calculation, which is individually held assets minus your liabilities equals your net worth. And then you subtract that. From that, you can subtract the equity that you have in your primary residence, the equity that you have in your business that you can take right from your business balance sheet, right? And any 401k type retirement accounts where you would incur a penalty for early withdrawal. Okay. So you take those three, you subtract those things out, and then the resultant is what we call your adjusted net worth. Okay. And that has to be under $750,000. Something to keep in mind though, let's say you're going to apply for the 8A program and you're married. Then all of the commonly held assets and liabilities, bank accounts, maybe your home, personal property, those kind of things, as well as commonly held debts other than the mortgage, those all get divided in half when you start trying to do the calculations for your adjusted net worth on an individual basis. So that's where the community property state regulations come into play. Okay, so that's your adjusted net worth calculation for determining economic disadvantage. Okay, so why think about getting certified? Okay, certainly it reduces the competitive mix in terms of if it's a competitive situation, you're only competing against other 8A firms. All right. And here's where the sole source contract opportunity really becomes pretty important. And this is where we see the vast majority of sole source contracting by the federal government is with 8A firms. Okay, because they don't have to go through a full-blown competitive process. They're able to be awarded a contract. It doesn't take them as much time, effort, and money, if you will, to put together a proposal. But it also allows them, to really get a good footing on what it takes to do business with the federal government. Because, I saw here in Sacramento, a lot of firms, a number of firms, their first contract in the federal space was an 8A contract, either with, and the predominant federal agencies here in Northern California in this geography are the Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation or the Forest Service or the Park Service, and to a limited extent GSA. But I saw and had a number of 8A firms in my portfolio that, their first contract with the feds was a sole source for doing work with the Forest Service. And so it was a relatively modest contract to get them started, but that's how they got their feet wet, and that's how they learned how to do business with the feds. Okay. And one of the key things about that is the SBA has the responsibility for determining if the 8A firm has the wherewithal, the capacity, and self-performance capability to execute before they give the okay to the federal agency to award that contract. Okay. But that's one of the main advantages of the 8A program. The other thing is, though, by statute, the SBA is mandated to provide management and technical assistance to 8A firms on an annual basis. That's part of the program, whereas it's not mandated in the other programs. So SBA has a whole group dedicated to providing counseling and education and technical assistance and whatnot to 8A firms. So that's another big piece of the program that's unique to the 8A program. So the next one we're going to talk about is Hub Zone, which is historically underutilized business zone. Okay. So Hub Zone, it's based upon census tract data where the population within that census tract is experiencing higher than normal per capita unemployment or lower than normal per capita annual income. Okay. And the whole rationale behind the Hub Zone program is providing an incentive via, the set aside contracts for firms that are located in these areas to hire folks in the area that live in the Hub Zone, or if they're looking to set up shop, to potentially locate their business in an area that's experiencing these kind of economic challenges. Okay. So, and so that's the hubs. The basis for the Hub Zone program is identifying firms and certifying firms that live in these areas that have economic challenges. Okay. So, as we're talking about, we're talking about areas, geographical areas that are having issues. All right. And so, from an eligibility standpoint, the firm, this has to be, again, small by SBA standards. Okay. Owned and controlled at least 51% by U.S. citizens. However, one of the things that's unique to the Hub Zone program is the majority owning entity could be a community development corporation, an agricultural cooperative, or even an Indian tribe. Okay. And because there are a lot of tribal areas, tribal lands that are considered hub zones. And as you might imagine, they're experiencing economic challenges. Okay. So those, from an ownership standpoint, this is unique for the Hub Zone program. Okay. And the two main criteria is the principal office, which is the office where the majority of the employees report to on a regular basis. must be located within a hub zone. And you can see some of the criteria: Indian country, military facilities that were closed by BRAC, those sort of things. So the principal office has to be located in a hub zone. And for instance, for construction companies, let's say you've got, remote locations, job sites and whatnot, where maybe you've got more people reporting there than you do at your home office. But that would not be considered a principal office because it's temporary in nature. All right. And I saw that a lot here in Northern California, where, the company would be located in a hub zone, but, they would have employees working in areas that were not hub zones. And the number of those exceeded the number of folks that were back at the home office. So and the second criteria is that at least 35% of the employees have to reside in a hub zone. It doesn't have to be the same hub zone that the business is in by mandate, but they have to live in a hub zone. Okay. And I will tell you that in Northern California, especially up in the northern part of the state, where we are for our APEX Accelerator, or even the other northern counties that are outside of our geographical footprint, lots of sole proprietorships, single employee, one-person shops, right? And if that applies to you, then one of the things to be sure when you apply for hub zone certification is make sure you identify yourself as an employee. I can't even count the number of times where a sole proprietorship would have their application bounced back from the hub zone office because they said you don't have any employees. Well, the person that owns the company is an employee, and if they live in a hub zone, then you meet that threshold for residents. Okay. But what they'll do is, let's say you've got, a certain number of employees, they will ask for all of the supporting documentation for your employees to verify that they do in fact live in a hub zone. So they'll look for, that your employees have lived in the hub zone for at least 6 months. They've got utility bills or phone bills and that kind of stuff. All right. And if you go to the HubZone portal, sba.gov/HubZone, you can get to the HubZone map. It's like Google Maps. You put in the address of the location you're interested in, whether it's your home address if you're working out of your house, or if it's the location of where your business is or where you're thinking about locating your business. And it will tell you whether or not that specific location is HubZone qualified or not. Okay. Benefits to the HubZone certification, again, and this is consistent across the board, is it limits competition. So you're only competing against other HubZone firms. Okay. And as we talked about earlier, one of the unique advantages is the price preference in full and open solicitations. Okay. So something to think about. Especially if you happen to be living in one of the more rural areas of Northern California. Because, for instance, the Forest Service in their Viper program for certifying firms to help them with wildfires and fire abatement and those kind of things, they will have some preferences for service disabled and HubZone firms. Okay. As they, go through their pecking order, if you will, of eligible contractors to help them out. So something to think about, and we can obviously help you with that certification as well. So we'll go to the third certification, which is the women-owned small business. Actually the fourth. And we'll talk about the two different flavors of the women-owned certifications and the eligibility and advantages as well. So there we go. So women-owned small business, this has been around for a long time. I think it was originally put on the books in the federal regulations back in around 2001, but it really wasn't until about 2011, 2012 that it really started to gain some traction, where Congress basically was telling the federal agencies, listen, you've got to start providing additional opportunities or more opportunities to women-owned small businesses because you are not even coming close to meeting the thresholds that are mandated by statute. Okay, so that's when it really took off. And there are two flavors. There's the women-owned small business and the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business. So eligibility criteria, pretty similar. The business has to be small, owned and controlled at least 51% by a woman or women that are U.S. citizens. Either she or they have to manage the day-to-day operations, hold the highest officer position, control the day-to-day operations. The SBA may even look at compensation to make sure that they're the highest paid, or that there isn't the possibility of someone else maybe negatively controlling the company, that sort of thing. And the thing that's unique about these two different certifications is they are NAICS code specifics. NAICS code, North American Industry Classification System. So depending upon your type of business, you will determine what your primary NAICS code is. And you input that when you do your registration in sam.gov just to get started. But the way these two certifications are divided in that there are specific NAICS codes that are applicable to each of those certifications. Okay, so there's a subset of NAICS codes that are applicable to WSB, and a separate and distinct subset of NAICS codes that are applicable to EDWSB. So depending upon what your primary NAICS code is, you can determine which of these certifications apply. Okay, and if you happen to be in an industry or have primary NAICS code or even secondary NAICS codes where they are not on either one of these two lists, then you don't have to really worry too much about pursuing this certification, because the federal government would not be able to do a set-aside, a WSB or EDWSB set-aside for that particular NAICS code if it's not included in one of those two lists. So that's one thing to check on the front end. What's your primary and even any secondary NAICS codes? Which list do they belong to? And then you can pursue the appropriate certification accordingly. Okay. So economically disadvantaged women-owned small business criteria is very similar to what you saw for the 8A in terms of determining economic disadvantage. The net worth is the same. The average annual income is the same. Total assets now can be actually up to $6 million. Okay. There again, you have to your primary NAICS code has to be one of those that's been attributed to the EDWSB certification or criteria. Okay. And at the bottom, you can see the URL to find out which NAICS codes fit which certifications. Okay. Again, the advantages, again, limiting the competition. So you're not if you're a woman-owned business, competing in a WSB set-aside, you're not competing against other businesses that are not certified, and really trying to level the playing field. And I think this is probably where we're seeing, over the last 5, 8, maybe 10 years, seeing probably the most progress, if you will, against those mandated thresholds has been in the women-owned small business arena. The 8A/ small disadvantaged business threshold has typically always been met. typically the feds have struggled trying to meet the hub zone and the service disabled veteran owned small business thresholds. That is still a challenge. But where at least I saw when I was at the SBA and subsequent to that, where the much bigger strides have been attained in the women-owned small business programs. Okay, so that's the good news. That's good news. Once again, just to reiterate, you know, the SBA is not accepting any applications right now. If you happen to have an application in the queue that was submitted prior to August 1st, when the moratorium went into place, their plan is to try and work through all that backlog and have that all completed and fleshed out by the end of by the whatever in September that they actually open up the new portal. So that's kind of what's going on with that. And I think, oh, okay, one last thing before we get into Q&A. And this relates primarily to the women-owned small business certification. There is the opportunity to go through the process of being certified as a woman-owned small business with a third-party certifier. Okay, this is kind of unique to the WSB program. Okay, and you can see the four entities that have been approved by the SBA to provide this third-party certification. And the good news is, if you decide to go down this path, it's going to cost you a few dollars. I think it's maybe $300 or $400. Should not be much more than that for them to work through the certification with you. But the good news is, once you've got that, you submit that to the SBA when you apply for WSB or EDWSB, and it really streamlines the process and accelerates the process because you've already been vetted by a third party. Okay, so something to think about. But and I think a lot of, to be honest with you, I think a lot of firms did that, went through third-party certifiers because it was challenging going and working with the SBA, just taking so much longer to get certified. I think that the handwriting's on the wall that that's going to change with the new portal. And from what I've heard from the SBA, they're going to try and really streamline the process to get these certifications done much more expeditiously than in the past. Okay, Amanda, now we're ready for Q&A. I got ahead of myself there a little bit.
Not to worry at all. And if you'd like to join me on camera for these Q&A, we have a ton of fantastic questions. And like I did mention in chat, we're going to be focusing on the questions directly related to certifications. And we're going to be doing that in sections. So right now we're going to tackle questions about federal certifications that we just went over, which we do have quite a few.
All right.
So one that you actually talked about a lot with a couple different certifications is sole source contracts. And Helen was wondering if you could just explain that point blank, what exactly is a sole source contract?
Okay, I can certainly do that. Sole source means that the federal government or the agency has identified a specific contractor that they want to do business with. They've got a project, whatever it might be. They have the authority to issue a sole source contract. And like I said before, this is typically in the 8A world or with the VA in the service disabled veteran. And they can basically say, hey, we want to do business with you. And give us a proposal. We'll negotiate it and we'll award a contract. It does not get competed. It does not hit the street, if you will. It's not advertised typically. In the case of the 8A program, and I don't want to get in too far in the weeds of it, but they actually have to if they identify a contractor, they have to come to the SBA. The SBA says, yep, they're good to go. They can do this thing. And then the SBA says, go ahead and negotiate with the contractor straight, one-on-one. So it's a one-on-one contract, not competed. So there's no competition. Yeah.
But it sounds like you have to be like the only company in that certification that can provide that.
If you were a hub zone or women owned, that's where
Okay,
it's much more difficult.
awesome. Yeah,
But in the
that's
8A world or service disabled veteran with the Veterans Administration, they can do it and it's pretty straightforward.
fantastic. That is great clarification. All right. And then, so someone was wondering, they are currently a certified volunteer at the VA. They have the USA Access ID, but they're wondering if being a certified volunteer at the VA means that they could be eligible for the veteran-owned small business certification.
Well, it's a business certification. So it's based upon a business, not based upon an individual. So if that volunteer has a business, the fact that they work for the VA is not the eligible criteria. They have to be a veteran. They have to have served, be considered a veteran, have been discharged from the military, their military service, and depending upon their circumstances, either have a service-connected disability or not to be eligible for either of those two programs. So it's based upon a business, and it's based upon the individual or individuals having been veterans and served in the military.
Fantastic. And then we got quite a few questions about 8A certification. Jaya was wondering, for the eligibility criteria of 2 years in business, is there a certain amount of revenue that you have to show for those 2 years, or does it just have to be 2 years in business?
There isn't like a minimum revenue threshold. It's more a case of what they're going to look at is the business generating revenues? Are you making, and are you profitable? Because it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep, right? And so they're going to look at your 2 years of financial performance and say, okay, they're executing on contracts, they're making money, and they're profitable. So they're gonna it's kind of a qualitative assessment, if you will, in terms of, do we think this firm has the capacity to succeed in the federal space? And a lot of times they will come back and say, you're not there yet. You've been in business for 2 years, but for the industry that you're in, you're not there yet. You need to grow. You need to get more critical mass. And then apply for the 8A program. I can tell you that over my 15 years in the working with 8A firms, more than I can count number of conversations I had with folks saying, you're not there, you're not ready yet. Okay, come back and see me in a year after you've got more contracts, more profitability, access to working capital, those kind of things. Because the last thing you want to do is rush in to get 8A certified, not be able to execute, have the thing time out after 9 years, and then you're like, well, what the heck did I do that for? Right? So don't be in a rush. Make sure you've got everything in place on the front end.
Fantastic. And that actually led into another question we had from Elizabeth, who was asking if a financially unperforming firm could be approved if they had a high potential for success. And it sounds like it wouldn't be a good fit quite yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure the federal government wants to roll the dice.
When you're playing with taxpayers' money, you have to have some sort of certainty.
That is exactly right. That's absolutely correct. Yep.
Awesome. And then there is a question from Chasey, and I believe I saw it come through during the 8A segment. She noticed the socially disadvantaged list, and she was wondering if there's something for folks who are disabled, maybe not in that socially disadvantaged racial group, but disabled physically. Could
You
that
know,
be a sort of disadvantage?
absolutely. You know, when we talked about non-member groups, you know, the preponderance of evidence, you know, a disability could certainly be an eligible criteria for determining social disadvantage. Okay, so if the individual has a disability and they have experienced badness, if you will, as a result of that disability, there is the provisions that a case can be made for social disadvantage based upon that criteria. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really good clarification because especially with the narrative portion being a required part and no longer assumed, it does kind of open up that gate to that sort of disadvantagement.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. And then Jaya entered a question while we were answering Q&A, so I definitely want to get to it. So it's mandated to do a government contract to get AA, or can you do private contracts and still show them the profits?
That's a great question. And that relates to all of the certifications when they talk about past performance and whatnot. You do not, your past performance does not have to be completely in the federal space. All right. And especially in the 8A program too. If you've got successful contract execution in the private sector, absolutely, that they take that in consideration. So it's not a hard and fast requirement that you have to have federal contracting experience. It certainly
Mhm.
would be preferred because they're going to say, hey, you know, they've got their feet wet, so they kind of have a little bit of a better understanding of what's involved, but it's not mandatory.
Fantastic. And then Saitama, do apologize if I read that name incorrectly, but they were wondering if low financial performance in previous years could impact certification eligibility for any of the federal certifications. Are there any other ones that really look for that profit generated?
You know, I would say really 8A is probably, it's pretty specific to the 8A certification. Um,
Okay.
the others, as you saw with the eligibility criteria, you know, that financial kind of piece doesn't really come into play per se. But yeah, certainly in the 8A space, but the others not so much.
Fantastic. And on to the couple questions we have about women-owned small business. Is there a current active site where they can check to see if they're already women-owned small business certified?
If they are, they should have received notification from the SBA. The SBA
Okay.
will issue, you know, send you a letter that says, congratulations, you're now officially WSB or EDWSB,
Okay.
right?
And yeah, to give a little bit more clarification, Emily was asking this question because she registered back in 2018 and was trying to figure out if she's still certified.
Um, if, well, the SBA, if it's been that long, the SBA should have come back to her a couple of times asking for recertification. Um, what she could do, a couple of things. You can go in, well, go into her sam.gov profile to see whether or not the box that says WSB is checked, right? Or
Hmm.
EDWSB is checked. Or go into SBA's dynamic small business search, DSBS,
That's a good one.
search for her own SBA profile, find her SBA profile, and that will indicate whether or not she is formally WSB or EDWSB certified.
Awesome.
Okay. So one thing to consider when you go to, if you're a woman-owned business, you're signing up in sam.gov, you can self-certify as a woman-owned business, right? It's not the formal certification we're talking about, but you can indicate I'm minority owned or I'm women owned or both, whatever. Self-certification, absolutely. Outside of going, separate and distinct from going through the formal certification process.
Fantastic. And I did just drop a link to the DSBS site in chat if you guys want to check that out.
Perfect.
I believe there was one more about WOSB, and then we'll be moving on to state and other certifications.
Okay.
Someone in the audience is closing the window and door business next month and becoming a new owner of this business. When do you think they should start the process to apply for women-owned small business?
I'd say
Well,
once
definitely
all,
after the certification's open.
yeah, well, that's number one.
Yeah,
Number two, after all the dust is settled in terms of the acquisition and the translation or transaction or whatever, once it's all complete, once the transaction, the buy and sell or whatever, and it's all complete, and you're registered or with the Secretary of State's office and all that good stuff. Once the dust settles, then go ahead and pursue the WOSB, so that they don't come back and say, I have a whole boatload of questions.
perfect.
Okay.
And so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to state certifications.
There we go. So yeah, state certifications. Let's press on. So now we're moving our way down the food chain, if you will. So we'll talk about the state of California certifications. And there again, why would you want to sell to the state? They spend billions of dollars every year. I don't know what California's budget this year is, $302 billion or something like that. And of that, as you can imagine, a very significant amount of it is within discretionary spending. Okay. So, whether, prisons, Department of General Services, all these other departments, they spend a boatload of money every year. And similar to the federal government, there's a 25% target of the state spend is supposed to go to small business. So that's billions of dollars every year. Okay. And as you might imagine, California is the 5th largest economy in the world, buys probably just about everything. All right. So depending upon what it is you sell, product or service wise, there's probably somewhere in the state government, somewhere in the state, there's somebody that buys what it is you sell. There again, it's just a question of finding out who they are. So within the state, there are 3 certifications: small business for public works, which came out a few years ago, and the disabled veteran business enterprise. What you'll notice there is not a minority-owned business certification, nor is there a women-owned business certification. So the race or the state is race and gender neutral from their small business certifications. Okay. Just something to keep in mind. So California small business certification, eligibility criteria: independently owned and operated. You can't be dominant in your field. So, to the point where you would, limit competition because of your dominant position. Okay. The principal office has to be located in California, so they want you to be a local business, if you will. All right. And the owners have to live in California. So, for this particular certification, they want you, to be here, be registered and here in California and also live in California. Doesn't mean if let's say you're a company outside of the state, you can't do business with the state. You can. It's just you would not be eligible for this particular certification. Okay. From a size standpoint, the criteria is the business has to have 100 or fewer employees and gross revenues less than $16 million per year, averaged on a previous 3 years. Okay. If you're a manufacturer, you have to have less than 100 employees, but you don't have the gross annual receipts cap to be worried about. If your business is on an average, a 3-year average, generates revenues of less than $5 million, then you're considered a micro business. However, the good news is you don't have to go through a separate and distinct process to be considered certified as a micro business. It just happens, as part of your normal certification process. Okay, and where that comes into play is, when the state departments are looking to do business, depending upon the size of the requirement, they may target micro businesses in terms of who they're going to reach out to for quotes or for proposals. Okay, so that's the main criteria for small business certification eligibility here with the state. As I mentioned, there is a new certification that came out a few years ago, small business for public works. Some of the same criteria as for small business, essentially the same. However, the size standards, as you can see down at the bottom, are significantly relaxed, if you will, compared to the normal small business certification. And the reason for that is public works projects typically are pretty big, right? Think highways, bridges, stuff like that, right? To where it's not going to be $100,000, $200,000 projects for public works. They're going to be multiple millions of dollars worth of work in size. So that's why, they want to provide an opportunity for small businesses that do public works type contracts to be eligible to bid on these things without having to, compete against all the big contractors on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so that's why they put that into place, so that the California departments, probably Caltrans in particular, can make contracting opportunities available for these types of contractors, for I'll say, the relatively more modest size projects. Okay. See, is that it? Yeah, that's pretty much it on public works. Okay, so you can see it's focused on, probably Caltrans type projects, maybe some Department of Water Resources projects, those kind of things. So the third certification is the Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise. Somewhat similar to the Service Disabled Veteran Owned Small Business certification at a federal level. Okay, so for the DVBE eligibility, here there is a service-connected disability threshold that has to be met. So with the state, it has to be 10% or above, as indicated on the discharge papers from the VA. Okay. Majority ownership is a key. If the business structure is a limited liability corporation, LLC, then all of the members of the LLC, if it's a single member or if there's multiple members, have to be disabled veterans and meet that 10% threshold. Okay. So something to keep in mind if that's your situation. And again, it's not only a question of ownership, it's also a question of control. Okay, so they're gonna want to make sure that the person or persons, veterans, upon whom eligibility is based, control and manage the day-to-day operations. One thing that's a little bit more relaxed is that the home office for the firm can be located anywhere in the United States. Does not have to be specifically located in California. Okay. So how to get registered? Cali Procure is the portal for getting registered as a small business with the state. And this applies for small business public works, and DVBE as well. So you can Google Cali Procure. It'll take you, you can get to the link that'll take you to here where you can register, with the state. You have to create a user ID and a password like you do with everything else, right? And there you can go in and enter your information to get certified. Now, as I mentioned before, in the federal space, they talk about NAICS codes, NAICS codes. Well, the state uses a different industry classifications. They use the United Nations Standard Product and Service Codes, UNSPSC. So, I would Google UNSPSC, put in your keywords that are applicable to your business to find out which code or codes you're eligible for or that apply. And then again, when you do your registration, you you identify what your primary UNSPSC code is, as well as any secondary UNSPSC codes that are applicable to your business. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Again, you can probably do it at one sitting. It's just a function of make sure you have all of your company, your business information available at the ready when you sit down to do the registration with the state. Okay. So advantages of registering, maybe you're doing business with entities within the state of California today, but maybe you're not certified. Some of the advantages. One of the big one is when you register through the Cali Procure portal, you automatically get enrolled in their bid matching service. So as they have opportunities in your industry code or keywords or whatever, they'll push down emails to you, and you can say, hey, you can at least assess whether it's an opportunity that you want to pursue or not. Okay, big advantage there. Secondarily, for smaller, more modest requirements, less than 250K, the departments have what they call the SB/DVBE option, where they don't have to go out with a full and open solicitation. They can limit the firms that they reach out to either 2 small businesses or 2 DVBEs. Can't be like mix and match one of each, and solicit quotes. And if they think they get quotes that are at market value, at fair market value, they can make an award. Very simple, easy, straightforward process. Okay. So that's a big advantage for going through and getting certified to do business with the state. It's for these modest requirements that may be applicable for you as you try to get started in the, doing business with the state. So definitely want to think about that as a big advantage to registering to do business with the state versus not. Okay. That was pretty quick on state. Do we have any questions?
We do. And it's
Okay.
actually one question asked by a few people. So I'd like to spend the majority of this Q&A portion. We will have another one at the end. I'd like to have you kind of define the difference between federal certifications and state certifications and why their business should get maybe just state certified, or maybe should they get both state and federally certified?
Okay. Well, I think it boils down to, if you're a small business, who do you want to do business with? Okay. So the federal certifications and those set aside categories, those socioeconomic categories, only apply to federal contracts. Do not apply to state contracts, whether it's California or Nevada or Arizona or wherever. Those certifications don't apply. to do business with those states. So if you're, if you're thinking you're going to do business with the feds, or maybe you're already doing business with the feds, but you're looking for opportunity to expand, or maybe a way to differentiate or go down, and increase your potential, if you will, then pursue the federal certifications. If your market space does not include federal agencies, don't worry about it. Okay? Because it's all similarly, the state certifications, there it might behoove you to pursue it. Number one, because it's relatively straightforward. Number two, a lot of times local cities and municipalities will recognize the state small business certification when you go to sign up with them. Okay. So, and I encourage my clients, and even when I was at the SBA, register with your local cities and counties where you think you might want to do business, because they, again, if they've got opportunities, they're going to push down emails to you, and you can decide if it's something you want to bid on or not, right? But a lot of local entities recognize the state small business certifications when you go to get registered with them, and so they can so it becomes, I think, a much easier process to register. You don't have to submit a bunch of supporting documentation. You can say, hey, I'm state of California small business certified. Here's my SB number. Boom, done. Okay. So it all comes back to who are your targeted customers as to whether or not to pursue federal certifications or state certifications, that sort of thing.
So definitely some market research to be done before really putting in the effort for these certifications to make sure if you're not going to be targeting federal agencies, you're not going to really need those federal certifications, right?
That's absolutely correct, Amanda. Yeah.
Fantastic. And just as a little heads up for everybody in the audience, we're going to have a fantastic article coming out this September about how you can do that market research at home on your own computer. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And we did have a couple other questions come in asking about state certifications.
Okay.
Jaya was wondering if the California certifications can count as certifications in other states.
Typically, the answer is no. I think in my experience, typically there's not reciprocity in terms, I mean, let's say, you're in Arizona. They'll say, okay, fine, you get your state of California small business certification. We don't care, right? It's not applicable, because we're gonna, if you're in the state of Arizona, they're gonna look to, all right, which business, we're gonna maybe have preferences, if you will, for businesses that are located in Arizona, right? My sense is that there is not reciprocity. There might be, but I'm not confident that there is.
It's hit or miss, honestly.
Because their eligibility criteria is probably different.
Mm-hmm. And then the discussion kind of broke us into local contracting. So I'd love to ask a couple questions about that.
Sure.
Jaya was wondering if you need to individually register with each city or local agency to do business with them, or if Cal eProcure covers that.
Well, the bad news is there's no central clearinghouse portal to register so that all of these cities and counties find you. So it's really a case of you have to go in and sign up individually with the cities and the counties. Okay. It's probably a little tedious. Doesn't cost you anything but some time. But yeah, if it were a perfect world, you could, put in your information once and then all these cities and counties would see it. But in reality, that's not the case. Oh, and along those lines, when you go to register with the cities or the counties, you typically will go to their purchasing or procurement department, will have the portal for registering as a small business. But you wanna find out what system they use, so you can figure out what industry codes to input into that. So like, the feds use NAICS, the state uses United Nations, some cities and counties use a system called public purchase. Well, public purchase has a separate and distinct industry code set. So when you go to sign up, you want to figure out what system are they using and what industry codes are applicable.
Perfect. And Jay, I had one final question, and I do have quite a few questions for the end, the final Q&A, because they're all kind of wrapping us up for the webinar. Jaya was wondering if they can register for other state certifications while living and incorporated in California.
I think, you could, I don't know about certifications, but certainly, let's say you're a California corporation, you want to do business in Arizona. You could probably go into the Arizona Secretary of State's office or their portal and register as what they call a foreign corporation. So you'd be duly registered and able to do business in Arizona. But you would not be able to register as an Arizona corporation. You would be considered a foreign corporation. But there's nothing to prevent you from doing it, right? You just have to identify the fact that you're not a domestic corporation for that state, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Perfect. And now on to our final section.
Oh, all right. And away we go. So other certifications, this is kind of a couple of other things that are maybe not on the traditional path, if you will. Okay. So I'm gonna stop the video here. So there we go. So disadvantaged business enterprise, AKA DBE. It's a specialized certification. It is administered by the Federal Department of Transportation, and on a national level, and each state DOT on a more localized level. It's the whole rationale behind it is for small businesses that meet the criteria to provide an opportunity for them to participate in federal DOT projects. Okay. And what you'll find is that, for federal projects, like think interstate highways, federal bridges, other things that the highway department or the Department of Transportation is going to be involved with, they're going to, if they have a solicitation, they more than likely will explicitly identify a DBE participation goal. So it becomes an opportunity area for firms that meet those criteria that are doing work that's DOT kind of related to make some money, if you will, right? Typically, DBE will be a subcontracting opportunity as opposed to a prime contracting opportunity, but that's okay. On a big project, if they've got an 8 or a 10% DBE participation, that probably translates into many millions of dollars worth of opportunities, right? So eligibility for DBE is very similar to the 8A in terms of both social and economic disadvantage, ownership and control for sure. The personal net worth, less than a little over $2 million, so that's pretty generous. And annual revenues, less than a little over $30 million on an annual basis. So there again, like we were talking about, some of these DOT projects, they're pretty big. And so even a 2 or 3% DBE subcontract can represent a bunch of money. So they want to make sure that the DBEs, are big enough, if you will, to be able to execute, right? So, if you're in a business that is involved with these kind of projects with Caltrans or whatever, and it looks like you meet the eligibility criteria, I would say pursue the DBE certification. Because like I said, there's DBE goals in pretty much every federal contract, every federally funded contract. And it doesn't have to be 100% federally funded. It just have to have, you know, even a minimum amount of federal funding, if it's included in the project funding overall, then there will be a DBE participation goal. Okay. So, and you know, it takes some time. I think it takes like 6 months to go through, and I think the Caltrans manages it here in the state, and you can access it through the Caltrans web portal, and they actually even do a site visit as part of their certification process as well. Okay. So social disadvantage, similar to the SBA, but with the exception that women now are considered socially disadvantaged for DBE certification, whereas as we saw before, gender was not a criteria off the as a matter of course for the 8A certification. With DBE, women-owned business does apply or would be eligible. Okay. So the application process, as I mentioned, it's managed by Caltrans. You can see the portal there, dbesystem.com. So if you go to the Caltrans website, you know, put in DBE certification in the search box, it'll get you to this portal, and there you can start entering all of your company information to verify your eligibility and whatnot in terms of the application process. So, you know, with the infrastructure bill and all the billions of dollars that are coming down the path to California, probably a lot of them are in process now, but there's certainly going to be more to come. You know, Caltrans and, you know, maybe Water Resources and, you know, other state agencies that are going to be involved with those kind of infrastructure projects are probably going to be looking for DBE participation, would be my guess. So there again, if it's applicable, I encourage you to pursue the certification. Yeah, just another kind of reiteration of the advantages. And you know, subcontracting is where we see it. We see notices from primes all the time coming to through our Apex saying, hey, we're bidding on such and such a project that has a requirement for DBE participation. So we're looking for potential DBE subcontractors in the following trades, right? And usually the list is pretty extensive. So there's a lot of opportunities, subcontracting opportunities for DBE contractors. And like I said, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep, right? And you know, as acting as a subcontractor really reduces the amount of risk that you have to take versus being a prime contractor where you assume all the risk and all of the bonding requirements and all of the insurance requirements and all that kind of stuff, right? So can be a real big opportunity, especially in a state like California, where you know there's billions of dollars of federal dollars for federal projects in play in any given year. Happens all the time. So, okay. So that's DBE. Another one we want to talk about is the California Public Utilities Commission. See how we're doing on time. Okay, we're all right. So the CPUC oversees all of the major utility companies here in the state. So think Pacific Gas and Electric, San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern Cal Edison, Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, those kind of folks, right? And so the CPUC, kind of oversees them, but also, they've got a very robust supplier diversity program, and they hold these utilities feet to the fire, if you will, to provide opportunities for small businesses. Okay. And so, and they enforce it pretty well. And so, you've got the ability to apply for a certification through their supplier diversity program. And it's things like, minority-owned business, women-owned business. They even take into consider LGBTQ, okay, as a certification. So there's, depending upon the type of business you're in, it might be worth your while to pursue the CPUC certification as well. So you do your certification, you're in the database. You've got your participating entities, but utilities, but also other entities that may be looking for diversity suppliers, small businesses, as part of their acquisition methodology, if you will. So, there again, something to consider. Doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to, you'll probably have people wanting to charge you a bunch of money to go through these certifications, but don't pay anybody anything, because in the long run, you end up doing the work yourself regardless, even if it's gathering all the information, right? So, and here again, it usually takes about 45 days and it lasts for 3 years. But the message here is the CPUC takes this very seriously, and all of the big contractors or utility companies, if you will, they've got a supplier diversity department that's that reaches out to the community to make sure that they're having the right participation from the small business community. Okay, so another something to consider, to have in your portfolio of certifications as you go through this contracting in the public sector arena. Okay. So as I mentioned, here's the eligibility criteria. Okay. And again, ownership and control, U.S. citizens, or in this case, legal aliens as well. So targeted towards disadvantaged businesses, primarily ethnicity or gender. But I think there might even be some provisions based upon economics as well. Okay. So the supplier clearinghouse is the portal to get registered with the CPUC. So that's the central point to get into their database, that there again goes out to all of the utilities that they oversee. So you don't have to go to each individual utility and register as a small disadvantaged business or whatever. So that's the good thing, is there's a one single portal to complete your certification with the CPUC. Lastly, what you'll see is, and especially here in the Bay Area, some of the larger cities will have what they call a local business enterprise, or LBE. And what it is they're gonna, in order of preference, they will award contracts to their local business enterprises versus other small businesses that are outside of the geographical footprint, right? So here where you see it, as I mentioned, is in the Bay Area. Here in Sacramento, the city of Sacramento, the state, or the county, they do have some preferences for businesses that are resident in either the city or the county. They don't really call it an LBE, but depending upon there again, if you where your business is located, I would register locally with you know, your city and county, because they very well may have a, a, a local business, preference and office portal, that they administer. I know in the Bay Area, for sure, San Francisco has it and Oakland has it. But there may be, those are the two that I know for sure. The other cities and counties, when you go to register, like we talked about before, you want to find out whether or not they've got local business preferences, price preferences, available or not. So you can see the eligibility criteria in terms of where your location is, a business license. You know, they probably have some sort of a size limit. And they may ask for past performance, that kind of thing, that to indicate that you are who you say you are and do what you say you do. Okay? So just, you know, another potential opportunity area for you to pursue, depending upon where you're located, as you go through getting registered on a more localized level to do business in the public sector. So some of the benefits you can see, you know, a lot of times, especially we see it in San Francisco, where they say, we're going to award this contract, but we're only going to consider LBEs for purposes of the competition. Okay. So they, you know, depending upon city or county, they may have, you know, specific requirements for primes or subs. Typically, they will provide some resources and help to the LBE community in their, you know, in their geography and that kind of thing. So, and it, you know, you want to check in terms of eligibility, whether or not the LBE certification has to be completed and in place by the time you enter the bid or by the time the bid is awarded. But typically it's required on the front end. So you have to be LBE certified in order to submit a bid on the front end. Okay. And I would go into it with that assumption in mind, that you got to have it in place before you can bid on an opportunity. Okay. With that, that's us, but we'll open it up to some more questions.
Absolutely. We do have a couple questions about DBE, which is where we'll go ahead and start. We're wondering if there's an annual salary limitation for DBE similar to 8A.
I don't remember seeing an income threshold. It was more business size, and the adjusted net worth calculation, as opposed to the you know, the annual income.
Okay. Yeah, and it's not something that I've heard in passing either, but a counselor, whether they're at the Women's Business Center or at an APEX Accelerator, can definitely help you figure that out and even help you polish up your application before you submit it.
Yep.
Amber was wondering, to qualify for DBE, do you have to be both socially and economically disadvantaged?
Yes. Yes, it's not an either or. It's similar to the 8A in that both criteria are required.
Okay. And if you're not economically disadvantaged under 8A, they just won't qualify. And for context, in Amber's situation, they're already HubZone certified.
Okay.
Would that kind of factor in anywhere?
Well, if for DBE, the answer is probably no, because it's federal versus state certification. Even though the DBE does have federal implications because it's Department of Transportation. Yeah. They got to go through the process, meet all the criteria. And HubZone doesn't have the social and economic disadvantage criteria associated with it. It's just kind of business size and that sort of thing, and where the business is located, right?
Yeah.
So HubZone, it doesn't really enter into the equation for eligibility for either 8A or DBE.
Perfect. And that's fantastic clarification. Jaya was wondering, do you have an estimate on how long DBE certifications should take to get approval?
From what I understand, it's about a 6-month process.
So it can take a while to get that final approval.
Yeah, because they go through and then they got to schedule a site visit and all that other stuff, and they probably have pretty significant workload. So, but what I've heard is a figure about 6 months. Might be less. You might get lucky.
Yeah.
But I would anticipate probably 6 months.
And is there any site that they can go to check on the status, or should they like reach out to a certain contracting officer or a person with DOT?
It's handled by Caltrans.
Okay.
I would imagine when they start the certification, there would probably be maybe a little bit of back and forth.
Okay.
And in terms of we need additional documentation, but they'll have a contact point for being able to check on the status.
Perfect. And then we had someone ask, where can you register for the LBE certification?
There again, like I mentioned, City of Sacramento or Sacramento County, City of Oakland, if you go to register, let's say your business is located in Oakland, go to the City of Oakland's procurement department or purchasing department. That's where you're going to register as a local business enterprise.
Absolutely. And I've
Same thing with
noticed
Sacramento.
when I fill out the newsletter for like our bids that we offer to our newsletter list, I see a lot of those smaller government websites do have like a doing business with tab. So that could be a really good place to start looking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. And I did have one more question about this section in particular. Are there any indigenous certifications that you're aware of?
Not that I know of
Okay.
personally.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I haven't heard a lot of. Darlene, are you aware of any indigenous certifications out there? Oh,
I think you're muted.
I'm sorry.
There you
No,
go.
no worries.
none other than specifically just being a minority. There's no programs out there I'm aware of right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't look like that is a common certification, but as
Right.
our lovely disclaimer in the beginning said, things very often do change. So
Yep.
definitely keep an eye out. And I believe that's all the questions we had about this section. So
Okay.
I do want to go ahead and advance the slides a little bit because I want to let you guys know if you need any help or even just want that coach in your corner, please do sign up for Apex Accelerator services and women's business services because we can work in conjunction with you and we can all offer a supporting foundation for your business to really find success. So if you are interested in really moving forward with these certifications, please connect with us. We really do want to help you find success. And then I do want to let you all know we have some very fun and upcoming events, both in person and virtually. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because you all will be getting these slides and recordings. I do want to get to a couple more questions that we have about the overall presentation. So Greta was wondering if they can bid on a federal contract while they're waiting for their WOSB certification to be approved.
If it is a WOSB set aside, I would say, look at the solicitation to determine whether or not you have to have the WOSB approved prior to submitting an offer or prior to award of contract. Because it should tell you explicitly what whether or not it has to be in place up front.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I'm not even going to speculate on if she's already in process, how long that's going to take.
Yeah, and it can be very situational, but you should have a contact with that solicitation, correct? They typically come out with a contact who you can kind of direct that question to.
Correct.
Awesome. And then Jaya was wondering if they have the state and federal certifications, but don't find any awards and can't really do much with it. Does that impact their certifications moving forward or their ability to recertify?
No, no, it doesn't. I mean, as long as you meet the eligibility criteria, then you can continue to recertify on an annual or however frequent basis is required. Yeah, yeah. So it doesn't, if you're not seeing any contracts, it doesn't mean you can't stay in the program.
Absolutely. And then Takia with Beautiful You was wondering about a certain situation. She is currently a sole proprietorship, but her goal is to change her business designation to an LLC. And she's wondering if that LLC gets all of these certifications and registrations, would the DBAs under that LLC also reap those benefits? Or does each DBA have to be certified individually?
I think the short answer is the LLC would kind of act as an umbrella, so she wouldn't have to go through and get certifications for all of for the DBE or anything. The plan there would be to get the transition to the LLC completely done, registered with the Secretary of State's office, all that good stuff done, then apply under the LLC, apply for certifications as an LLC, and that should cover her for any DBA underneath it and that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. And so we will go ahead and call it there as it is just about 12 o'clock, and I want to make sure everybody gets out for their lunch. So with that, thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you, Darlene, for being here with us with WVCs.
Thank you, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here with you as well.
It's always such a delight to have you on our webinars, and thank you so much, Paul, for such a great presentation.
My pleasure.
And with that, as you guys exit the webinar, you will be redirected to our feedback survey. If you do have 5 minutes max to fill that out, we are very interested on your input for this webinar, as this is one of our newer presentations. We would love to know what you think about it and what kind of formatting or maybe other certifications you'd like to see information on. But in the same way that we would like your critical feedback, we would love to know if it was a great presentation and you got what you wanted out of it and you're going to go out and get all these certifications. We always love to hear what we can do better for you and what we're already doing really well. So your feedback is very important to us.
Definitely.
So with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. And that'll be all.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
participation.